Good morning, good afternoon, good evening around the world. My name is Doug Brunke. I'm the founder and CEO of Global Chamber. And what a fun, interesting, important conversation we're having today. Foreign direct investment, as Jim was mentioning prior to the recording, in Phoenix is spectacular. It's the largest foreign direct investment in history going on right now, driven by the decision by TSMC to build a semiconductor ecosystem in North Phoenix. If you haven't been there, it's just rising out of the desert off of I-17 north of the 101 in a spectacular way. It's going to be fantastic. It already is amazing. It's not only TSMC investment, but it's drawing companies in the supply chain from not just Taiwan, but from Japan and all over the world. So, welcome to Phoenix. It's important for all of us on the business side, on the commercial real estate side, on the economic development side, of course, to understand what foreign direct investment is, what are the challenges, what are the legalities of it. And lo and behold, here at Global Chamber, we have an expert. Janice Tepley Wright is with Russ Lyon Sotheby's, and she is an expert to the point where she teaches what foreign direct investment is. Recently in Scottsdale for Scottsdale Realtor Group, she presented multiple day presentation on foreign direct investment. And today she's condensed it down so that we can fit it into an hour. Jim Huang and Ellen Tsu are here. And before uh, Janice starts, I wonder if both of you could make a comment both about this program that we have and also why do we start with foreign direct investment? Why is it so important? Why is it so important in your world and in your communities? Thank you, Jim, and thank you, Ellen, for your leadership.
Doug, thank you for setting up such a great platform. When we were doing this, I said one of the most important parts was real estate, since we needed to house it, whether it was just the vacant land that needed to be developed or repositioning properties that have become obsolete, as Janice knows really well of the landscape. And with that, there was always the foreign investment that was important, especially with now what's going on with tariffs and just how money moves and products move and how the world keeps changing. It's just so important with Global Chamber to really show people how real estate is affected, how the money flows around the world, and how everyone puts supply chains as it's ever changing and growing. So it is exciting, especially with the new technology. And Doug, I'd always say, love the new format as we start talking with economic development in major cities so people understand it. Also, large companies that are impacting, states, regions, cities, and then also the residential, I always say, because not everyone is in one place. Everyone now with remote working is moving all over the place. I mean, we've gotten calls, and I'm sure with Global Chamber, many people like Paula, right, everywhere in the world, probably with the Golden Visa in Portugal, people are interested in moving. But Doug, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for this great platform. And thank you for pushing the real estate part of it, because it does touch every part and every aspect of Global Chamber.
Thank you, Jim. Ellen, you are amazing, based in Vancouver, and had the honor to meet you now a few times. Do you have any opening comments, please?
Yeah, I just want to thank Doug and Jim for bringing me to this group. And, we started out as a real estate group, but look what it has expanded into. We're looking into foreign direct investment, economic development, because what we're seeing right now, there's a trend going on. What Doug has mentioned, what's happening in Arizona is what comes first is foreign direct investment. And how that works is they go hand in hand with the local economic development, what they're doing to bring in the business from different parts of the world. And then real estate comes in, of course, all the services that follows afterwards. So there's a lot of activities that's intertwined in economic activity within the country, the states, and also, of course, the city part. So that's the reason why I think this is a great segue and also a great start for us to start putting everything together so we can see everything from top down. And then if we have an opportunity to drill into more detailed information items that people can learn from it. Thank you so much, Doug, for the opportunity, and thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Ellen. This is the first of now a revised weekly session for Global Chamber on the triangle that includes business, economic development, and commercial real estate. Still working on a couple different working titles for this, one being business, economic development, real estate deals, and the other one being business FDI real estate deals, and iterations of all of those words. And so, probably during this session and also as a follow up between now and next Wednesday, I would love to hear your input and thoughts about including that triangle and those elements and bringing them all together with the ultimate deliverable being deals that we all get involved with on the business side, with economic development, and in the real estate world. The platform that Jim has been so visionary in bringing to Global Chamber based on RESAS is being worked on now, and we'll have updates for you next week. Without further ado, Janice is ready for her presentation.
Ready.
So Janice, thank you for your involvement with Global Chamber, your advisory board leadership in Phoenix, and now today the program on foreign direct investment. What are you imagining the time frame is, and how should people ask questions? What can we expect for them from the last?
Well, I think first of all, I want to be sure that Mila has my slides, and we can start. Are you ready, Mila? And then I can just go like this and ask you to go from, yeah, great. Thank you so much. Okay, so go to the next slide.
And then,
So this morning, this class that I have written and been teaching, it's called Introduction to Foreign Direct Investment, and I'm teaching it to realtors in Arizona. It's a 3-hour continued education course. You don't have to be here for 3 hours today, though. It's just to introduce the topic of foreign direct investment, talk about definitions so that people will understand about the topic. And for the agents here in Arizona, they get a 3-hour credit for legal toward their 21 hours that they have to take every other year. So it's a legal course. And that is how it was written. But today, I'm only basically doing the first part of it. And then I think we talked about Doug maybe doing another one in June, and we could do July also, and just continue with the course. But I think this morning, the thing we're going to go through are some definitions and sort of the evolution of foreign direct investment and how everything has changed over the years. And so if...
Joaquina Viva,
Sorry?
temos que ser.
I'm sorry. Well, it looks like we need to mute a couple folks, and I think.
Oh, okay.
Please go.
So basically, so this morning we're going to have a conversation on one of my favorite topics, and that's foreign direct investment. And I'm eager to share with you my experience and my knowledge. And I have written about, researched, and practiced this topic for many years. And as Doug said, Arizona is currently the hot spot in the United States for foreign companies coming here, for foreign students coming here, and for luxury home buyers. And Doug already mentioned the TSMC, which is the largest foreign direct investment ever happening in the United States, and that was $165 billion have been invested here. And in addition to the Taiwanese semiconductor plant, there are also many other foreign investors coming into Arizona. So I believe that this is just the beginning, and we're going to see many more. So next slide, please. So today, what we're going to do is talk about some important terms. And the first one would be foreign direct investment, aliens, treaties, CFIUS, and FERPTA. And then we're going to go through cultural norms. And I think that's important for you to see how all of this has evolved in the United States. We're going to start all the way back in 1970, and there's a reason for that. And then we'll go in increments. And then we'll also talk about some of the state and federal changes since President Trump has taken office again in 2025. Next slide, please. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background, and I want you to understand why I'm so fascinated with this topic. So I've been in the real estate business for 46 years, and I currently hold broker's licenses in Hawaii and in Arizona. And I earned my degree in real estate from ASU. And you can see there on this slide, the first book or booklet that I wrote was called Alien Investment Concerns and Opportunities. And that was written way back in 1981. And that explains the laws in each individual state for foreign investment. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Okay, next slide, please. So after I graduated from ASU, I spent 1 month in each country in Europe. I was gone for 14 months. I started in Greece. I went to Monaco, France, Germany, Belgium, UK, Norway, Denmark, Sweden, and I studied and worked in real estate firms. And while we have this map up here, I just want to talk about the way the world was at that time. And all of these European countries were autonomous at that time. And so they had borders, you had to show a passport. When you crossed in and out of the different countries, these people spoke their own languages, they had their own currencies. And also, when you're looking at this map, just to note that communism was still in place in the Soviet Union, and the Eastern Bloc countries like Poland, Czechoslovakia, Bulgaria, Romania, all of those countries were tightly controlled, and you had to have a passport and a visa and a reason for being in those countries. Next slide, please. So in this picture, this is 1981, I was speaking in Stockholm, Sweden at the FIAPSI World Congress. And I don't know, are any of you currently involved with FIAPSI? Do you know about FIAPSI?
I am. I'm a
Okay.
very, very recent member.
Okay. Well,
I
that's an
didn't get them
organization.
totally yet.
Great. It's based in Paris, and it's been, I don't know, I can't remember when it began, but it involves a lot of brokers from around the world. And they have a Congress every year. It's still ongoing. And anyhow, so that was at the end of my trip. And so next slide, please. And so after those years, the bulk of my real estate career was spent in Honolulu, Hawaii, where I managed several companies over the years. And my first job in Hawaii was to manage 72 agents. And in this picture, you can see that we had 17 nationalities that were represented. And so I had agents from Japan, Korea, China, Greece, United Kingdom, New Zealand, Australia, and that's just to mention a few. So Hawaii was a very multicultural state, and basically you're immersed in the Asian culture. So in those days in Hawaii, we worked with foreign investors from all over the world, including Asia, Canada, and Europe. And so now my career has come full circle and I'm right back in Arizona, which is where I want to be. And to my amazement, when I moved back here to retire, I had no idea what was happening in Arizona. And after a few years back in the business, I thought, nobody realizes what's happening here with foreign direct investment, which has caused me to get busy and get back to writing and teaching. Okay, so the next slide, please. So definitions and terminology, and that's what we're going to talk about next. And I think that this is so important for you to have this background and understand these words. So when you're watching the news, you can have a deeper understanding. Okay, Sharon just said the FIAPSI World Congress is next month in Vienna, Austria. So anyhow, that's a great organization to get involved with if you have the time and the resources to go to these different events. Okay, next slide, please. So my question is, do you know what FDI means? Do you know who is an alien? Do you know what CFIUS is? And do you know what FERPTA is? Do any of you know what any of these are? Anyone want to comment?
Foreign
Okay,
direct investment. The others, I
yeah.
don't know.
Yeah, we've got that one, foreign direct investment. Okay, let's go to the next slide and we'll go through these in detail. So foreign direct investment, and notice we're saying direct. Okay, so that is an investment made by an individual or company in one country into a business interest in another country. And I just want to give you a little background on this. So the key to FDI is ownership. So it's direct involvement, it's ownership, control, and long-term interest. So I want to give you an example for clarification. So let's say a Canadian mining company buys land in Arizona and it controls the operation of the copper mine, then that is foreign direct investment. If the same company buys shares of stock, that is a portfolio investment and that is not foreign direct investment. And just an aside there, when we talk about real estate, residential real estate, we don't say foreign direct investment, we just say foreign investment. So there is a difference there. Lots of people don't know that, and it might not make a difference. But the reason that we say that, we've got something on the screen. I don't know what that is. Okay, there we go. So anyhow, just foreign investment, that is for residential real estate. But foreign direct investment, the reason it's good for you to understand that is because that's how the international statistics are written. So you can understand it that way. Okay, let's go to the next one. And next slide, please. And so this is alien. Back to alien, please. Okay, alien. Who's an alien? So an alien is a foreign national or foreign entity that purchases, owns, or invests capital. So I want to make a point here. Since President Trump has taken office, almost every day we hear about aliens on the news. But I want to be sure that you differentiate here between who are the aliens. So we're not talking about illegal aliens who are in our country. We're talking about aliens who are investors in the US and following our investment laws and reporting laws. So now this word doesn't sound very nice. So you wonder, why would they call investors aliens? It's not politically correct, but I think it will remain because this is the way that our tax laws are written and our U.S. immigration laws are written. So I believe that will remain. Okay, let's go to the next one. Next slide talks about international treaties. So obviously in the real estate industry, we don't deal with treaties. But I think it's important for you to understand that these treaties are the backbone of every international real estate transaction. They create the rules for the work permits, the visas, for taxation, for non-discrimination, and for reciprocity. And I think it's also interesting to know that they have an arbitration just like we have in real estate, we have arbitration if there are problems with these treaties. Okay, the next one. Next slide. Okay, this is CFIUS, and this is the Committee on Foreign Investment for the United States. And this is important. And this is one of the committees that they're constantly updating and changing things. So this is the formal body responsible for reviewing certain foreign and real estate transactions to determine whether they pose a risk to national security investment. And I just want to mention here, we did a class last week, and I said, does anyone know anything about these terms? And one lady stood up and she said, oh, I know what CFIUS means. Well, she works for Luke Air Force Base in Glendale here in Arizona. So she knows that foreigners cannot invest near sensitive Air Force bases or strategic locations. So I told her if I had a prize, I would give it to her because I was impressed that she knew that. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Next slide. Okay, so this shows that CFIUS is the committee here, but all of these departments, the Federal Trade Commission, Agricultural, Defense, Department of Justice, all of these are involved with this committee if there is a question about whether a certain investment can be made in the United States. So, okay, next slide, please. Okay, state laws on foreign investment. So I think it's interesting to know that each state in the United States has their own laws on foreign investment, and they can vary dramatically because some have laws against foreign investors investing in agricultural land and these sort of things. So we'll talk about that a little bit more later. So the next slide, please. So this is FIRPTA, and anyone in the real estate business should know this one. This is the Foreign Investment in Real Property Tax Act of 1980. So this says that U.S. tax law requires tax withholding when foreign persons dispose of real property interest. And so it ensures tax collection on gains for U.S. real estate by requiring buyers to withhold 15% of the sales price. Now, this is a federal law, so it applies in every state in the United States. But it's also interesting to know that some states like Hawaii, Honolulu, Hawaii, they have another tax on top of this. So they tax foreigners twice. But one thing you should also understand on this is not a tax, it's not a penalty tax for foreign investors that they pay because we as American investors, we pay capital gains. Ours is called capital gains, theirs is called FIRPTA, but we're still paying, we're both paying the same thing. So this was an equalization of the taxes. Okay, so this is another thing I always put in my real estate segment is as realtors, we do not give tax or legal advice. So we always must refer the clients to attorneys and accountants on specific questions like this because we want to be sure not to be giving them tax advice. So I guess does anyone have any questions at this point before we start looking into the 1970s and 80s and how things have evolved and changed? Does anyone want to make a comment on anything? I'm not used to being out here all by myself. I'm used to the audience when I can talk to you and see you. But does anyone have anything you want to comment on or an experience with any of these things?
Thanks everybody for joining. Whether you're in the panelist area or the attendee area, you can speak, raise your hand, and happy to hear your comments or thoughts. Jim, what's resonating with you so far?
Say all of this, as we all know, with FERPTA investments internationally, EB5, right, Janice? All these things we've all went through. It's important and how we structure these deals right. But I just went to an ARIA policy day where we're fighting the alien land laws in certain states that were doing this, and we think it's a slippery slope where it could be, obviously discriminatory, where we can get into a little politics and history of how these things kind of didn't work for us, right, with Japan and many
Right.
other countries in the past. So, it is always important to have this in the forefront and to stay in front of this. So, Janice, this is really good stuff. And the impact, right, that we're seeing right now in the Phoenix and other markets that we see money moving around. So, really good
And
stuff.
we're going to talk about some of that discrimination and some of the things that are happening, and we're going to look at some headlines. So that that was a good segue into the next. Do you want to go to the next slide, please? Okay, so what we're going to talk about this morning, and Doug, I want to go back to your question. You asked how long would we speak, or I speak this morning. I think this meeting is scheduled to be about an hour long. Is that correct?
Yep, we've got about 25 minutes left.
Okay, so what I think we'll do in this segment, and then if we want to um, continue with this in some other segments, we can do that because the course
Yep,
is written, it's available. I would love to share it with you. So I'm just going to go ahead with, and we'll do as much as we can today. And then if Doug wants to schedule another one for June or July, I'm certainly available, and I would love to do that.
perfect.
So what we're going to do is start in prior to 1980. Then we're going to go to 81 to 2000, 2001 to 2004, and then what's happened since President Trump became president again. So next slide, please. So in each of these segments, we're going to talk about cultural norms in the United States. So what was happening in those years? Who was investing? What were the headlines? What were the new laws? And what was happening in the world? So next slide, please. So in the 1980s or prior to the 1980s, fear and suspicion surrounded foreign direct investment. It was thought that it was unpatriotic and dangerous. And concerns were that we were losing control of America in manufacturing, farming, technology, and defense. And there's always the fear that foreign investment causes land prices to skyrocket. I personally don't believe that, but that's often in the news. Okay, next slide. So prior to 1980, the dominant investors were the United Kingdom, Canada, the Netherlands, West Germany, and the main sectors of investment were in petroleum, manufacturing, finance, and some early real estate investments. Okay, next slide, please. So let's look at cultural norms. Let's look at how the world was in those days in the United States. Next slide, please. So in those days, and I don't know how old you are, those of you who are listening today, but you will remember that the telephone was stationary, and we had to stand up to turn the television, the channel on the TV. We read newspapers, we had cameras, we had typewriters. And next slide, please. And I want to also comment, in those days, our real estate contracts were only like 2 pages long. So it was a lot easier, a lot less paperwork than we have now. So talking about the way people got their news in those days, look at this broadcaster here. He's got his earphones on and he's got his phone and his clipboard and in those days we watched the news for at 5:30 for a half an hour, and it wasn't until I think it was 1978 when ABC News became World News Tonight, and then the world news started traveling globally. Next slide. And this is how computers looked in those days and how offices looked in those days. Next slide. These were headlines in the news in those days. People, as I said, they didn't agree with foreign investment. They didn't want it. And foreign investors flock to U.S. farmlands, and foreign investors go on a spree. And who owns the farmland? And the foreign land grab scare. Those were the headlines in those days. Next slide. Now, I'm not going to have you read all of these, but the importance of this is this in the 1970s, this is when our government started to realize that this was becoming a hot topic, foreign investment. Foreign investors wanted to come to the United States. So you'll see here the Bureau of Economic Analysis, 1972. That's when they started collecting data. Prior to that, there wasn't much information. And you'll see in 1975, that is when CFIUS was established. And then the International Investment Survey Act, 1976. And the most important, or one of the most important, is the Agricultural Foreign Investment Act, 1978. So if you have a reason to go back and look for some of these laws, you'll be going back, in most cases, to the 1970s. Okay, next slide. So globally, what was happening globally back in those days, the countries just were beginning to rely on each other economically. International trade agreements were expanding, and multinational corporations were continuing to grow. Okay, next slide. So I put this in here because I think this is so important, that you can't raise your children the way your parents raised you, because your parents raised you for a world that no longer exists. And if you think about the things that we just looked at, the TVs, the cameras, all the things, those things are gone now. And life was so much slower in these days compared to what it is today, which has everything to do with globalization and international investment. So next slide, please. Now we're going to get into the 80s and 2000s. 1980 to 2000. Next slide, please. So this is when foreign investment really started taking hold. So if you look at these statistics from the World Bank, it shows that in 1980, 1980, federal direct inflows were 16.9 billion. You look at 1991, and these foreign investors held more than 400 billion in US assets. You can see how everything has changed. Next slide, please. Okay, so who was investing in US real estate in the 1980s to 2000? Next slide. Oh, and we'll talk about cultural norms. You can next slide, please. So this is how things looked in the 80s. And you can see the big computer there. That's just exactly what we worked on in those days. You see the first cell phone here. And I remember the lady who owned the company that I managed, she had one of those. Very few people had them in those days. And they cost about $4,000 and they were heavy. And is that Paula? Paula said she had one of those cell phones. So you must have been in the business for a while, Paula.
Yes, we call it here a brick.
Yeah,
Asa,
and
brick,
that's how it felt. It felt just like a brick.
a
That's
brick.
right. The next thing you see here is the fax machine. And I remember I was in Hawaii in those days, and I thought that was really the coolest thing I had ever seen in my entire life. It was amazing that we could then fax contracts. We did a lot of business with the Japanese in those days. And we also managed a lot of properties. We had a property management department. So this made all the difference because we could fax our contracts back and forth. So instead of having to mail things, you could fax it and get your signatures and get your contract accepted. Okay, next slide. So these were the headlines in 1980 and 2000. Fear of foreign investment. The Japanese were buying up America. The Chinese were taking over Wall Street. Foreign buyers driving up housing prices, and the Chinese snapping up homes and pricing out locals. So this just goes back to the comment that we heard previously. When you see these headlines and you think about discrimination and what was happening in some of these areas. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, well, let me just make the last point. So what was happening in Hawaii in those days is you remember that the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. And you can imagine that the Japanese coming in and buying all of the big hotels, the waterfront, the big, beautiful major hotels, that was not a very good idea in those days. People didn't like that. And that became it didn't become a problem because they had the right to do it, but it was not completely accepted. Okay, now this slide, I want to talk about major world events that happened in 1989, and that's when communism was overthrown, and the Soviet Union dissolved in 1991. Then 1993, and this is a huge one, obviously. Um, this is when the modern day EU went into effect. And remember, I talked earlier about how all of the European countries were closed in those days. You had to cross the border, they had different currencies, you had to change money every time you went into another country. So this changed everything in Europe and made it much easier for people and money and everything easier for people to cross the borders. Okay, so next one, please. I've got to catch up with my notes here. Okay, then we have new restrictions against foreign investment in 1980 to 2000, and this was the ex Florio amendment. And let's see, let me find my notes on this. Okay, this gave the President of the United States the right to block foreign acquisitions of US companies that could threaten national security because there were rising concerns at that time of the Japanese, in particular, taking over businesses. The next one is NAFTA. And of course, that's very important to us in Arizona. NAFTA is the North American Free Trade Agreement. And this is a treaty between the US and Mexico and Canada and brought it into one trade zone. So that is very, like I said, very important to us in the state of Arizona. Okay, next slide. And this will take us into 2001 to 2024. Next slide. Okay, do you remember, or have you ever felt like this poor guy? Now you can find the power switch, flip it on. Technology has, at this point, really begun to take over our lives. And so, next one, please. So I think this is funny because this is just the truth. So the phone my sister has now when she's 6, and then these are the phones that we had when we were 6. Next slide. So what is the single invention that has the greatest impact on the world? Can we all answer that one? Next
Computers?
slide. Okay, you could go on to the next slide. Well, it's this. So it's our computer that's
Yeah.
now in our hand. So you think about those first slides and the way we lived and everything we used to do, we had to, is now in our hand in our cell phone. And so that has really changed the world and the way we do business and the way we live our lives. And it's made a huge impact on everything. Okay, next slide. Okay, and then this is talks about who were the investors at this time in 2001 to 2024. And so there was still a lot of strong investment coming into the United States, but major investors in these years were Canadians, and we have a lot of Canadian investors here in Arizona, and the residential real estate market, they dominate our market here for foreign investment. Now China is starting to show up in the statistics, Mexico, India, and the United Kingdom. And at this point in time, compared to the previous years, so people are now buying for lifestyle reasons. And of course, we see a lot of that here in Arizona, where people want to be in this beautiful community and enjoy the sunshine and golf and tennis and everything that is available here in Arizona. Okay, next slide, please. So basically, I went through the process of these years to make the point that technology basically controls our lives and it's changed everything, which has also changed the way we do business and the way that people invest. Now, let's see who was on earlier. James, he was talking about. James, you said you were talking about the cloud platforms and how and the business that's being done now. Do you want to say anything about how technology has changed the way we do business?
Janice, yes. And we've all watched it. I love the little toy. I used to have one of those phones and the brick, right? That microwaved our head. But you're right, with the phone and the connectivity nowadays with technology, and obviously the hot word is AI all over the place. Technology keeps advancing and moving. That brings the world much closer and smaller. But of course, as everyone knows, and I know Teresa and many others that travel around, right, doesn't really disrupt the personal relationship, friendships, and trust right now. But it is moving forward more and more. Like you were talking about the brick, the the fax machine. When we all got it, we're like, wow, this is incredible. We don't have to use carbon copies anymore, and
Yeah.
others. So it is changing, and everyone has to really be aware. The world is getting smaller. It is going quicker. New ideas and innovation keeps happening. So I know with Global Chamber, with all of us and what Doug's put together, with so many members, so many information we can pass and share with each other. But now with the technology to pass referrals, leads, opportunities like no other can happen with Global Chamber, since we have the trust of people and knowledge, but now we're implementing technology into Global Chamber so we can move it quicker. And Janice, I'm sure you and many others, real estate, and I know residential moves quicker than commercial. You guys are still right with residential adopting. And boy, we haven't even got into how social media is changing everything too. Because
Yeah.
before we would never use it. But I love everything about understanding culture. You do have to understand it and how money is moving around and really how the phone and everything is changing the world. So thank you for all this good information.
Okay, well, let's go to the next slide. I just want to make a couple of little comments here, though. I want to talk about, probably your own families, but my family, for example, like my stepson is married to a lady from Sweden. My nephew's married to a lady from Germany. My other nephew is living in Argentina with his girlfriend and his daughter. And you just think, how the world has changed. And also, I want to make the point that English has become the dominant language. In those days, when I was in Europe and different places, a lot of people did not speak English. And now, through our music and our television and our movies, um, a lot of people learned English through those, through television and through the music. Um, let's see. Let's see. Okay, now we're going to talk about the headlines in the news for 2001 and 2024. So this is when China joins the World Trade Organization, the U.S. opens trade. Now here's our CFIUS is expanding their authority over foreign deals. There are more restrictions, and more restrictions have come since President Trump became president again. And the U.S. tightens scrutiny on Chinese investments, opening doors to foreign-born buyers, and overseas are flooding the U.S. market. Those were the headlines. Next slide, please. Now, I am absolutely no expert at all on trade. I know some of you probably are, but I think this is a very important here to show what has happened with the Chinese exports in the trillions of dollars, and how impactful this was for the World Trade Organization to join in 2001. So China has become the world's second largest economy behind the United States. And we know that it's deeply involved with the global supply chains, AI, semiconductors, and renewable energy. And if you look at this slide, it shows that exports increased 14 times since 2001. Think about that, trillions of dollars. Okay, next slide, please. So you'll see that the Chinese share of the world's exports was 3.8%, and now it's 15.7%. So, Doug, I know that the chamber is very, very involved with trade. Do you want to say anything about this and how this has changed so many things?
Well, I would, except we're right at the top of the hour, and I'm just wondering how we should best proceed because it feels like you're right in the middle of this. And
Well, it's a 3-hour class.
yeah, no,
So
it's
I think the best way to handle this is to continue at some point in time if everyone's interested in the information. And
yes, yes, yes,
so I
yeah.
can go to
Wow.
the end of this. Basically, I think I only have 2 more slides to finish this segment, and then we could start the next time to
Yeah.
talk about how all these laws and everything has changed since President Trump became president. So maybe
Okay.
we can just finish like two or three more slides, and then we can resume at some time in the future, and I can take you through more of the laws.
What we'll do, if it's okay, I know you and I already talked about your schedule. Next week you're not available, but
Right,
in
right.
2 weeks was
two
possible.
weeks I am available, and I'll be available at different times in June too. So I hope you're learning from this, and this gives you a little different perspective because I'm trying to put the whole picture together. Now, when I had several people say, well, after we attended your class, we watched the news differently because they understand a little bit more about the background and what's happening. So, why don't we just go through the next 2 or 3 slides, and then that will be the end of my presentation today. And I'm happy to hear from any of you. And I think it's important that if you have comments or something, questions, I would love to hear from you.
If
So,
if you
Miles,
don't if you
go ahead.
don't mind, because we have another Globinar starting right
Oh, okay.
now, my leg
Okay.
to be pulled. Do you mind making some closing remarks? And then what we'll do is we'll do part two on June 3rd, and we'll work with you on getting that set up.
Okay. Well, like I said, I can just close here basically just to say that well, there was one more law that came in to place in 2018 that was significant. Um, the point here is that the laws are beginning to tighten for foreign investors, and I guess I can just close with that, and then I'll hope to see you again in June. And I thank you for attending today.
In 2 weeks, we'll continue this discussion. So save your questions until then.
Okay.
We have we've put Janice's LinkedIn profile in the chat area, and you can find her Janice Tepley Wright on LinkedIn if you can't find the link. As you can tell, she's amazing. Jim and Ellen, do you have any final comments that you'd like to make, please?
I just want to say this is what we want to learn. Thank you, Janice. And I remember with the snowbirds coming down during the last recession, boy, we should have bought more property, but good
That's right.
information.
Okay, well, thank you. Have a good week, and I appreciate you attending today. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. It was
Thank
a
you.
very nice promenade.
Good. Okay.
Thank you.
You
Bye-bye.
didn't mention the telex. So,
Oh, I forgot about that.
yeah.
Next week,
Okay.
next week we have a
Have a
special
nice week.
we have a
Bye.
special program next week, and including Paula will be part of that. And then in 2 weeks, come back for Janice. Thanks,
Yeah.
everyone.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, see you.
Bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Bye-bye.
Janice.
Bye.
Bye.